Our subject is one of Sydney's oldest churches, a neo-Gothic church called the Garrison Church. It has a simplicity which really just reflects the lack of resources at that early stage of Sydney's European history. And here is, if you like, my first take, the first point where I paused in the drawing. I started with that top horizontal line, and then I came down on each side, trying to visualize the proportions of that large rectangular section down to the base of the door. I then aligned those gate details with the vertical lines I'd drawn so far. Now, that buttress that comes down on each side of the window, that outward sloping section where it thickens towards the base, was really important to help my alignment horizontally with other details. And then I had the door to place in as well with all those multiple inset sections. I got to say, this wasn't my first start. I actually had a false start with this drawing. Let me show you the problem. This was my first start to this scene. Now, I know I'm always talking about pushing through mistakes, not to be scared when a line's not quite in the right place, but to make corrections and to discover that we can usually hide mistakes or minimize their impact. But sometimes, particularly at an early stage, we can put lines in such an unhelpful place that it really is worth just starting again and using this as a springboard to a better second start. And I just so messed up the doorway here, the arch over the doorway, and particularly because this is such a plain building and the detailing with the door is really one of the major features of the facade. I really thought it was worth starting again. And also I wasn't completely happy with the proportions here. I felt that for the size of the door, that this framing had to be slightly larger, and I wasn't quite happy with the proportions and placing of this window either. However, after I did this, I realized that I hadn't done my just playing around making marks and getting a sense of what I was going to do on a scrap piece of paper, which I still like to do even for location sketches. And so I have a book where I do those things. And this was just the quick roughing out, trying to get a sense of proportions and how it was going to work. This was for a location sketch I did last week. But what this enabled me to do, because I was trying to do it the same size that I thought I would do it in my sketchbook, I was then able to get my sketchbook paper and position where do I want this to be so that I can draw left and right the detail that I hope to draw. And when I did this, I was able to say, okay, so this corner is going to be here. And then I used that place as the starting point for this section. So let's leave this and see how our drawing's progressing. So next I progressed the building out on each side somewhat. Two ladies perched on the stone wall in front of that low hedge, and I decided to capture them quickly as well to give a sense of scale to the drawing. And then I worked at establishing the building to the left and right, and I was very careful with alignment, more alignment. And to the right-hand side, I aligned that side church door with the front door, lining up the details. And I measured the angles for the top of the side walls by using my pen again, holding my pen up in front of my eye at the angle of the wall and then bringing it straight down onto the paper. Much the same way as I slide across from a reference photo. It doesn't sound like it's particularly accurate, but I find it surprisingly so. Now it's time to draw some more. In this next stage of drawing, I'm really pushing out with more of the details and some of the context. So getting that triangular section up the top of the front wall is important, trying to get the angles correct. Again, I measured the angles and I tried to visualize the height in comparison to what I'd already drawn beneath it. That framing for the bell, which is no longer there, was something I noticed when I did that very first roughing out on that scrap paper, that my tendency would be to draw it too large. So I was particularly restrained, therefore, to draw it a bit smaller. I did, unfortunately, I think, draw those pinnacles, as I call them. I don't know what their real title is, just a little bit too large. But I did them by stacking upwards each section. I visualised them as separate forms stacked on top of each other. Notice those strips for the roofing panel along the top, that they actually follow a perspective pattern as well. The slope of the line changes as it moves from left to right. And you can see the southern approach to the Sydney Harbour Bridge just at the left of the scene. So as we get towards the later part of the drawing, we're starting to think about some of these final decisions as to how we want the drawing to look. Some hatching on the right-hand side helps to establish clearly that edge of the building and to hopefully push it forward a bit, give clarity to the overall structure. And similarly, on the left-hand side with that tree, I exaggerate the darkness in that corner of the tree against the building to do a similar thing, to push the building forwards away from the background details. Now, I start to suggest the stonework. It is such a plain building, it's going to look too white and too smooth if I don't suggest the texture of the surface. And there's two different effects. The brickwork in that upper triangular section, we see the gap between the stones quite clearly, and the stonework below that is a very smooth, just a line join. Clearly, the triangular section at the top was added later. So we want to capture those two different effects. And so I just do the stonework on this front section, trying to get a feel for how much I want to do. But I'm also aware that I'm going to do more of these stonework lines on the very front part because it's visually more prominent and it's closest to us than on the rest of the building. So once I get a feel for what I do here, then I can lessen it to some degree as I move left and right. So now for our final working on this drawing, it's a case of how much detail do I want to bring out. And you can see now that I've extended the stonework to the left and to the right. The other significant thing I've done is to add some hatching on that stone building to the lower left of the church, because again, darkening that wall pushes the church forward a little bit, helps make clear the actual structure of the church. Added a little more hatching, I think, to the approach to the bridge on the left-hand side as well. And there's a figure on the right-hand side, some distance back. But otherwise, I think this pretty much is done. It's taken me just on an hour and a quarter to do this scene, and I used a 3mm Copic fineliner to draw it with. It was an ideal day. Warm, but overcast, so I wasn't getting sunburned. And here is the absolutely beautiful location I got to sit in one of the older parts of Sydney, under a lovely Moreton Bay fig, or it could have been a Sydney fig tree, I'm not sure. And that's it. But there's one more thing I want to show you. And here it is. This is only the second time I've taken this seat out with me urban sketching. And I've got to say, this little tripod construction makes the most incredibly comfortable seat to sit on while I draw. It's made such a difference not getting up with legs that have gone to sleep and hobbling around for 10 minutes, barely able to walk because I have no feeling from the knees down. I can really recommend something like this. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope you found this video of my urban sketching experience helpful. It's something I'm wanting to do a lot more of, so if you'd like to see more videos on this, please let me know in the comments. And I hope to refine my videoing process for location sketching somewhat in the future. Without a camera crew to go with me, it certainly presents a lot more technical challenges and a somewhat different approach to my normal videos. But what I have discovered in what was only my second time going out doing urban sketching with pen was that my method of drawing in pen from reference photos is incredibly applicable, directly transferable really, to drawing on location. So if you haven't done location sketching, can I suggest you give it a go? And particularly starting with drawing scenes where you're not trying to draw things that are constantly moving, but as in this example that I've just done, concentrating on something that fundamentally is staying still and maybe just including one or two more mobile items that do temporarily linger a bit longer than most of the others. But whatever you draw and however you draw it, whether you're sitting comfortably in a chair by the fire or whether you're in a very uncomfortable, windswept, noisy location with cars and trucks swarming all around you, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.